What are the theories that folks from the business community have about why Trump is doing this? Doug said that there's no explanation, there's no rationale. Trump hasn't articulated a goal, and without a goal, there's no way of knowing when it's been achieved, to know when it will end. Why do business people think he's doing this?
Well, I think it depends on the business person, right? But there's one theory that has been bouncing around now for some time, which has to do with this idea of a Mar-a-Lago Accord, right? So a purposeful devaluing of the dollar. Mm-hmm. And so if you squint at it, it's kind of like looking at a pile of dirt and trying to see a Picasso. So the strategy there would be that, you impose steep tariffs. The dollar is devalued in trade negotiations. That makes American exports more competitive. And you also squeeze China because China holds a lot of debt. As the dollar becomes cheaper, you're exerting pressure on China. Now, I don't think that would work at all. Very few economists think it would work. And, what are the side effects or the grave knock-on effects? You have huge inflation for American consumers. You have a declining dollar. You have declining American influence within the broader global economy. So it's just a giant misplaced bet. But if you try to understand an underlying rationale, that might be one guess. I don't think it's a good strategy, but it's one way of looking at it.
I want to know some of these people in the business community who see a pile of dirt and see Picasso, because I see a pile of horse manure that they think is dirt. I mean, It is a pile of manure. We've been staring at it for 9 years from a political lens. And I guess what I want to press you on is, here's what's going to happen. There's no reason to think that you're wrong or that Doug is wrong, right? The economy does have a psychological aspect to it, but it clearly has physics to it as well. And the tariffs have tripped both wires, the psychology of the economy and the physics of the economy. The politics, the gravitational pull, the politics is that Republicans will lose both chambers. Why does Trump want that?
Does he believe that? I guess. I don't know. This is all, we get into the psycho.
Ted Cruz clearly believes
we get into psychoanalyst table.
Well, let me show you where his coalition is.
Sure.
Here's David Portnoy.
This one's the only one that I can think of that's like man-made. Like the stock market crashes in 9/11. Yes. Stock market crashed COVID. Yes. But this is like a decision that one guy made that crashed the whole stock market. That's why we're calling it Orange Monday, not Black Monday. I saw Howard Lutnick being like, we're going to live in a world where there's an army of Americans screwing in little things into iPhones. Like, what? What American's going to take that job? So to me, this is all about negotiating the tariff rates. It's all about getting equal trade, fair trade, which everybody wants. And it's a noble thing that Trump's trying to get done. But he can't really have leverage negotiating these deals. If the stock market is going to crash, everyone's going to join, what's he call it, the panicking party, and he has to reverse course. So you see, he's kind of like stuck.
See?
Yeah, what I see a lot from Dave Portnoy and from the Mar-a-Lago Accord crowd, I listened to a long podcast about that to try to understand it the other day, is what I would call cope. Cope is the word that's happening, because these guys just refuse to believe the reality that's in front of their eyes, which is that they elected a moron who bankrupted a casino as president, and now he's doing to the country what he did to several casinos. That is what is happening here. There's not any complex plan in place. There's not a 40 chess negotiation happening to rebalance trade between us and Europe. There's not, none of that is, they're not devaluing the dollar to pay down the debt. None of that is part of the plan. This is a mad king who doesn't know what he's doing, who loves the word tariff, and who is, stubborn, and who is going to ride or die on this. Maybe one day he'll change his mind and decide, I can declare victory because I have a cult of 33% of supporters that'll go along with it, and I'm annoyed with rich people calling me and complaining. That might happen someday, but that won't be because it was part of a broader plan that was in place.
Disruption is the point, though, right? The point is not, there's one way of looking at strategy that he's doing A to get B to get C. He just wants to disrupt everything. And so, and bring people to the table on bended knee, right? So Scott Bessent yesterday was saying that upwards of 50, 70 countries were now calling the White House.
What proof is that? Did any countries confirm that? I heard that there are at least a few countries that don't want to get on the phone with him. They don't trust him.
I think that is probably completely right. And the reason why is A, they don't trust him, and B, their domestic constituents really don't like him and don't want to make a deal with this president. I mean, the interview with Larry Kudlow and Scott Bessent yesterday I thought was so illuminating, because you had someone who was from Trump 1, Larry Kudlow, part of the first Trump administration, looking in the eye of Trump 2, Scott Bessent, and just explaining kind of a basic reality of why the goal of a zero trade deficit for the likes of the United States, which is a huge economy, on its face is not a worthy goal. And Bessent's answer was completely incoherent. And I think that's all you really need to know.
Here's the other thing is, if the negotiations were happening, like, let's even give them the best case scenario. Let's say that Scott Bessent and Trump negotiate 15 deals with Israel and Turkey and a handful of other countries. Like, we still, like, the China tariffs are going the wrong direction. He's moving them up to 104%. And, like, even if they cut 12 deals, we still would have a tariff increase that would be beyond anything that happened in Trump 1.0, anything that any of the small tariffs that Biden did, any imaginable tariffs. So that wouldn't, it might help the stock market for a day or two, but it would not help, like, these long-term systemic problems that are being created. And I was pretty struck by Doug Holtz-Eakin. I don't know if all of the viewers caught this, but in a normal Republican presidency, Doug would have Kevin Hassett's job or Scott Bessent's job. And for him just to bluntly say, we're headed towards a recession and probably stagflation, like, that's not coming from somebody, in our camp.
No, I know. I mean, Doug, let me bring it back to you.
No, that's true. No, can I say just 3 things before, just observations? Number one,
of course.
he will never admit he's wrong.
We got 2 hours.
Let's be very clear. Very clear. He is not going to say he made a mistake. He's not going to do a U-turn. Anyone who's trying to talk him into that is wasting their time. Number 2, he did in his first term levy steel tariffs that were very damaging and didn't work, and he steadily hollowed them out. He exempted Canada, he exempted Mexico, he exempted Germany, exempted Brazil. He exempted all the major sources of steel for the United States. So they were for show by the end. He is capable of doing that and calling it negotiation. So keep an eye on what he does. And the one thing that happened last week that I really thought was important was he did not go forward with any genuinely additional tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Those tariffs would rip the North American economy apart at tremendous cost to all of us. There's no benefit to them. He didn't do it. Someone got to him. So there's these little contradictions to the overall rhetoric where, he does respond to pressure, and we'll see how it plays out.
There isn't a red or blue America when a president's policies wipe out what you see here, part of the $6 trillion losses in days. Everyone loses. And we have new evidence right now showing the backlash to Trump's flailing trade war. That backlash is broad. From the bankers and CEOs I mentioned and quoted some here at the top of the show, to political leaders in both parties. Plus this weekend's protest, which tapped into the wider anger there. You can see the sad emoji with a crashing retirement account and the failed policies that those protesters say are hurting Americans and small businesses in real time. Now, then there are still many people who, of course, avoid traditional or credentialed press. This is what CNBC looks like if you turn it on the screen here, but people may not see that kind of news coverage of the tanking markets. There are people who consume alternative, younger media, that's as a cultural matter, or what you've heard about, some of these MAGA-friendly podcasts and streaming shows, and that's a political matter. And a different set of voices rules.
One bite everybody knows was a volley. 7-7. Good, solid.
Most companies have all these different requirements, and they're openly allowed to discriminate against especially heterosexual white men.
The attempt to feminize men is ongoing on the left.
Check out this rap and let me know your honest thoughts.
I think it's incredible. I think it's incredible.
That's from one of the streaming shows there. And a Tesla Cyber Beast retails for about $100,000. The young man you see there, Aiden Ross, would have a harder time buying one now. Now, he's supported Trump and even scored a coveted interview, but he now complains with the tariff crash that he's losing money, that he feels, quote, poor after all this, which is part of a wider backlash from MAGA podcasters and streamers. And let's be clear, many of them speak to their audience in an unfiltered, authentic way in real time. That's part of what draws their audience. Now, they have MAGA credentials. I'm showing you they have this past talk about supporting Trump's promise for the country, But many of them are now sharing with their huge audiences, which can number in the millions or tens of millions in the case of Rogan, who I showed earlier. Well, many of the ones you're about to see, they're sharing concern, panic, confusion, and even disgust over the cost of Trump's flailing trade war.
Yeah, I'm voting for Trump. Trump has put his tariffs all over the place. I've been trying to understand them. I don't. And everything's in the because of it. Donald Trump just cost me $20 million or whatever he did. Maybe don't be on the golf course.
Everyone in this room, everyone loves you. And I just want to say you're a true hero for this country. I don't know how many of you guys are invested in crypto or stocks. What the is going on with our country? Guys, why am I poor?
Because Donald Trump is the nominee against Joe Biden, I won't just vote for him. I will walk over broken glass to vote for him. His giant tariff policy that he just dropped on the market unilaterally, probably unconstitutionally.
This is a vivid demonstration of very well-known prominent Trump fans, whether they're in your feeds, as they say, or not, going through their own personal experience of the harm of these Trump economic policies as their viewers watch. And this shows how the medium is still the message. The younger viewers might see their favorite commentator reacting to the markets in real time, kind of like a popular YouTube reaction videos, or sometimes there'll be a video of someone cooking or a dog doing a trick, and then someone else reacts. That's how some people are getting these bad market updates, learning how bad things are in reality. And it is hard to dismiss these last 5 days as some, quote, snowflake old media conspiracy when very MAGA-friendly new media are live streaming their pain.
Donald Trump just cost me $20 million or whatever he did.
What the is going on with our country?
Maybe don't be on the golf course.
Guys, why am I poor?
Now, losing 20 million means you have more than 20 million. Trump's richest backers are losing even more. The tech titans from the inauguration, who had criticized Trump before, remember, who had given public warnings about exactly the type of governing failures we've been seeing now, they're down tens of billion with a B. The one who lost the most has actually been the most involved. Musk on the right losing over $100 billion in the past few months alone. It's hard to even get your head around the numbers. This theme runs from those tech elites to the MAGA podcasters I showed you to some of the most seasoned Wall Street insiders. Take the hedge fund leader and Trump backer Bill Ackman, who made a lot of news this week by bemoaning how the tariffs from Trump are leading to a self-induced economic nuclear winter. Total reversal, I should say, from his post-election vow that Trump would do nothing to interfere with America's economy.
We're stepping into, I would say, the most pro-growth, pro-business, pro-American administration I've perhaps seen in my adult lifetime, certainly. President Trump will do nothing that interferes with the success of the country, the success of the economy.
He will do nothing. That was post-election. That was just over 100 days ago. And yet, what Ackman is referring to, the quote I read you that's new, tariffs causing an economic nuclear winter, the tariffs are from the guy Ackman wanted elected. Ackman now part of this larger money-losing team who said they just didn't think Trump would tariff like he said he would. Ackman also goes further in addressing this. He claims it was actually unforeseeable that Trump would do what he said he would do on tariffs, posting, quote, I don't think this was foreseeable. I assumed economic rationality would be paramount. My bad. All right. And yet, might be or not, it was somehow foreseeable to other people, some of whom are, of course, Trump critics or in the opposition to Trump and MAGA, some of whom are just nonpartisan individual experts or journalists who try to track what he really does and how he operates. And we have a long record now for that. Because many other people knew that it was foreseeable if Trump campaigned on pardoning convicts like he vowed that he would, and he did. Or that he would try to use power to punish opponents like he vowed, and he's doing now. Or that he would flout court orders and not care about limits on his power from immigration to tariffs to other features of the presidency because he said he would, and he previously dodged 4 different indictments like he vowed, and he did. So, added together, just a couple quick examples, yes. It was foreseeable that President Trump, if elected, would tariff like he said he would. One might say Trump had been very clear he wanted to tariff like it's 1930. That's a kind of a Prince Smoot-Hawley reference. You know, tariff like it's 1999. I can't hear the audience in the back, but I'm sure that 1 out of 1,000 people appreciate the reference. The point is, I don't usually do Prince combined with Smoot-Hawley references. One might say that if this wasn't such a serious news night and costly news week. So, all right, we'll put Prince aside. But here's how the very serious Nobel economist Paul Krugman dismissed that kind of rhetorical wobbly defense, which I'm telling you about because this is part of our reality, and Trump's got a few years left in office. Krugman writes, these ultra-wealthy backers are shocked to discover that Trump is who he always was. While the Times' Michelle Goldberg notes many investors did delude themselves about Trump because they either leaned right or they wanted lower taxes or they just hoped the money would keep pouring in, so they looked the other way. And now the sell-off is feeding a buyer's remorse in the selective memories. And for voters who may not follow every single story, they are on to this one, and that will only continue if the markets keep tanking and the recession risk rises. Trump voters are finding all that talk of lower prices and prosperity has not been Donald Trump's stated priority. Instead, he's warning of more pain while he golfs. The markets are down on the tariffs, with warnings of a wider recession risk rising. So some were in denial that Trump would tariff exactly like he planned. Some were in denial about Trump himself, a lesson that they could ignore at their peril, given that Trump is currently saying he'll hold power past 2029, which is illegal. So if you didn't believe that he would do the pardoning, and you didn't believe he would do the tariffing, and you didn't find that foreseeable, then buckle up for a president who, while in power, is saying he's, quote, not joking, and he intends to rule past 2029. Our job here is to look at the facts together. Don't delude yourself out of those facts. Other people did see the risk and the impact. Politically, the bad news for Republicans dates to an old law of politics, popularized by President Reagan, but it's been reportedly said or in circulation from far earlier. The saying is a recession is when your neighbor loses his job. A depression is when you lose yours. In other words, how do you experience it? Well, millions of people may be personally experiencing these impacts. Whether you're rich enough to be a podcaster who says he's out millions, or you're just someone trying to get by. It's always different when it hits you. And there need not be any glee in any person's pain or loss. I say that whether they are MAGA or not MAGA, whether they are American-born citizen or immigrant, whether they're being hurt by Trump's stubborn, flailing tariffs policy and they live in this country or they live somewhere else. No glee in the pain. But those podcasters are experiencing what they sometimes call in the vernacular L's, losses. Trump is making many people in America take a giant L. That's not in doubt. You can look at the markets, you can look at the numbers, you can look at your retirement account, or you can listen to MAGA podcasters who are talking about losing so much that one of them feels, quote, poor. But as always, life is about what we do with it, what's happening, what we experience, what we might be learning. Will these losses also be lessons? A different type of L. That's the other big question about a crisis that has just begun. And a crisis that, remember, if you want to learn from, even MAGA bankers tell us is a crisis, a giant L, that is Trump-inflicted.
More now on the president's threat against China to impose an extra 50% tariff on goods imported into the U.S. if Beijing doesn't withdraw its 34% counter tariff. NBC's Janice Mackey-Frayer is in Beijing for us and has the latest on how China is reacting. Janice?
China responded to President Trump's threat of additional tariffs with defiance and its own threat of countermeasures to fight a trade war with the U.S. to the end. If President Trump goes through with what he has vowed, this additional 50% tariffs on all Chinese goods going into the U.S., that's 104% on anything consumers buy from China. Clothing, shoes, car parts, toys, tech, household goods, the list goes on. China is very clear in saying it will not back down from imposing countermeasures to what officials here call U.S. blackmail. They see negotiation as legitimizing President Trump's trade blitz that is hitting manufacturing hubs right across Asia. Japan, Vietnam, Cambodia, South Korea, they are all signaling they want to negotiate with the U.S., though talks, it seems, are no guarantee of getting tariff relief. Here, a spokesperson for China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs confirmed there are no talks at any level between the U.S. and China over trade, saying, quote, the U.S. lacks a genuine willingness to engage in serious dialogue. Now, before the markets opened here today, the government unleashed a series of measures to help stabilize the stock market, including share buybacks by several state-owned companies. They're known here as China's national team, and that helped the markets close higher. The deadlines, though, are piling on now. All these back-to-back tariffs are set to take effect over the next 48 hours and threaten to disrupt trade, supply chains, and ultimately raise prices for U.S. consumers down the road. Janice Mackey-Freer, NBC News, Beijing.
Joining us now is Ned Price, a former senior State Department and CIA official. Ned, when China says it will fight to the end, what could that look like?
Well, Anna, it will look like nothing good for American businesses and consumers. We've already heard from your correspondent that with these tariffs set to go into effect, it could double prices of imported goods from China. Look, Anna, there is no question that the playing field for American consumers and businesses needs to be leveled with China. But there is a smart way to do that, and then there is Trump's way of doing that. And I think it's important to distinguish those two precisely because of what we've heard from Beijing and frankly from Washington over the past week or so. Trump's approach has done nothing but embolden leaders in Beijing. He has really imposed these massive tariffs and a mistaken belief that tariffs are not a means to an end, in other words, leveling the playing field, but really an end unto themselves. And he's given Chinese leaders really no face-saving off-ramp. We often forget that leaders like Chinese President Xi Jinping, while may not be elected in the democratic sense, may not be worried about his next re-election, is worried about his legitimacy and legacy. And Donald Trump has really put him in a corner. And just as you said, as your correspondent said, they're girding for a fight. And ultimately, a fight between the U.S. and China on these points will only result in higher prices for American consumers, precisely the effect that Donald Trump says he was elected to counteract.
President Trump did post on Truth Social, quote, China also wants to make a deal badly, but they don't know how to get it started. We are waiting for their call. It will happen, he writes. Does China want a deal? Do you think they'll call President Trump?
Right now, there's no sign of that. And in fact, the entreaties for engagement have really been going in the other direction. It has been the White House that has been quietly signaling for weeks now that they expect a summit meeting between President Trump and President Xi to happen in the coming months. On the other hand, we've heard quite the opposite from Beijing. We've heard whispers, and those who have engaged with Chinese leaders have told us that the Chinese are not interested in engaging until they see an off-ramp. And what President Trump has done, again, to paint President Xi into a corner without giving him any sort of face-saving way out of this, has really left China uninterested in dialogue, at least at this point.
Ned Price, appreciate your insights. Thank you so much for being with us.
Henrietta, this is an intense moment. The clock is ticking to midnight, anxiety rising, then falling, but the uncertainty lingers. What are investors and everyday Americans who are now reassessing everything from cars to food purchases, what are they to make of it?
Well, right now it's fair to be uncomfortable and lack clarity. There's certainly no clear guidance coming from the White House, except for, as you showed earlier, from USTR Greer, who is expressing tremendous amount of confidence that all of these tariffs are coming. No one is going to be excluded before midnight tonight. and we should anticipate that these tariffs, especially on China, the EU, and some of our largest other trading partners, stay on for the foreseeable future. I think what the market is responding to right now is an advance notice that we are heading into a direction of extreme GDP contraction, potentially recession, now being baked in at most of the big bulge bracket banks, in some cases with 60% odds.
So, Christine, President Trump was asked about what seemed to be some conflicting messaging on tariffs. Let me play that.
There have been some mixed messages from your administration. You're talking about negotiations, and yet others in your administration are saying that these tariffs are actually permanent. What is the action?
Well, it could be. They can both be true. There can be permanent tariffs, and there can also be negotiations, because there are things that we need beyond tariffs.
So, Christine, what do we actually know about these negotiations and what the administration thinks it can achieve here?
What we know is that a big boatload of tariffs go on at midnight tonight at 12:01, and that's going to be really disruptive for American consumers and businesses. So that's actually happening, and Jameson Greer and others have said that's happening. The president has said that Japan is sending a delegation. He has said he wants to do one-stop shopping in a post he posted about South Korea. But I would remind people that it took 2 years to get the USMCA, the Mexico-Canada agreement, and there are 50 to 70 countries that say that the White House says will be trying to negotiate with them. So I don't know what happens here quickly in the near term. There are people close to the president. There are, backers of the president, billionaires who would like to see a pause on everything that's supposed to happen tonight so you can have these negotiations. There's just no sign that that's going to happen. And when you look at the market, I would just point out the market's up some 400 points. That seems on a normal day, that'd be a big bounce. 42,265 was the level of the Dow before all this began. 42,000, that's 8%. So even a big rally today, these stocks are down hard.
Yeah. Melanie, were senators involved in today's hearing more interested in getting answers on these tariffs, or frankly on venting the frustration that they are hearing day after day, hour after hour from their constituents?
Yeah, it was definitely a mix. Certainly, there were some Republicans who are desperate for more answers about what Trump is trying to accomplish with these tariffs and also how long the economic pain is supposed to last. As you mentioned, the messaging has been really mixed from the White House. So this well-timed hearing was a perfect opportunity for some of these senators to really extract more clarity on that subject. But there were also Republican senators who did not hold back in showing their concern and frustration with the White House. One of the most notable exchanges so far came from Republican Senator Thom Tillis when he grilled Jameson Greer over Trump's all-at-once approach to tariffs. Take a listen to that exchange.
In this scenario, the decision maker who decided the alla prima approach, who has obviously had to have spent time anticipating what we saw in the markets and some of the pushback, I'm assuming this all got gamed out because it's a novel approach. It needed to be thought out. Whose throat do I get to choke if this proves to be wrong?
Well, Senator, you can certainly always talk to me, but
are you at the tip of the spear?
Well, I'm at the tip of the spear for certainly.
And Greer also tried to assure senators that Trump is already getting results by testifying that at least 50 countries have already tried to come to the table for talks with Trump on these tariffs. But there's no doubt a lot of anxiety in the GOP right now about these tariffs and about a prolonged trade war. At the moment, there have only been a handful of senators who have really been willing to publicly break with Trump, but we'll see how long that lasts, especially if the markets don't start to turn around pretty soon here.
And in the meantime, Ashley, there are also signs of infighting among the members of President's team. Today, the Wall Street Journal reported a dozen have expressed exasperation with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. And just a couple of hours ago, Elon Musk called White House trade advisor Peter Navarro a moron who's dumber than a sack of bricks. What's going on inside Trump world?
This, what's interesting, feels very reminiscent for those of us who covered the first Trump term of the first Trump term, where Trump really encouraged a team of rivals, where you had competing factions who were busy trying to outmaneuver and knife each other inside the West Wing and then leaking publicly to the media. And so this time around, up until this point, it has been a much more disciplined, streamlined, aggressive machine we've seen from the White House. But this is signs of those real cracks. Elon Musk, obviously sharing this publicly. He has also tried to communicate his concerns about tariffs with Trump privately. You have other people like Scott Bessent who have also privately tried to move Trump off of this, or get him to at least come to what, sort of everyone on Wall Street calls and desires, which is an off-ramp, but still then publicly going out there and touting the administration line. So we're, about 3 months into his second term, and it will be interesting to see if this is a blip or if this is a return to sort of the chaos and infighting and cracks that were such a hallmark of his first term in office.
I just want to make note of the fact that on the other side of the screen, you're seeing the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Her briefing has begun. If she makes news, we will bring that to you. But in the meantime, Henrietta, the president himself said today he believes China wants a deal very badly. But as things stand now, tariffs in excess of 100% could potentially hit tonight. Even if we got deals with other countries, how could a full-blown trade war with China impact the global economy and Americans' everyday lives?
Well, this is almost $500 billion worth of trade that we do with China. And I think when the president says that President Xi wants to come to the table and negotiate, I would say there's literally no evidence to support that, even going back to his first term. They like to talk about the phase one trade agreement as though it was not carried through in the Biden administration. But recall that President Trump put tariffs on China during his first term 7 years ago that are still in effect. And China has not negotiated any of the underlying components with the United States on those issues, whether intellectual property theft, forced tech transfer. They haven't even purchased more soybeans. So we have no history of success with negotiating with China. And my contacts in China who are there right now on the ground are suggesting and saying very clearly that President Xi has no indication and no interest in negotiating with the president under this strategy. They have not even gotten on the phone yet. So we have a long way to go before any kind of deal is reached with China. And that's most problematic for U.S. farmers who are going to have to be bailed out as a result of these trade wars taking much longer than the president has anticipated or telegraphed to them, especially with regards to China.
And Christine, we're hearing from people already who are changing their habits based on either what they're seeing or what they're expecting. Take a listen.
It definitely makes us think twice before we buy something. We have to be a lot more careful with our options and how we buy food.
I go to the Goodwill. I go with the hand-me-down clothes. Actually, what I have on is hand-me-down. Everything goes up. So now you have less money to buy out there for the food, especially when it comes to kids.
Do we have a good handle on the impact of tariffs right now? I do know anecdotally from people who have tried to buy things that maybe have a lead time that they've already been told that the price is going to go higher.
And we've seen in the consumer sentiment surveys that people are concerned about this and they're concerned that tariffs are going to lead to inflation and they're being more defensive. And when consumers who drive 70% of the American economy start to get defensive, that's when you get worried about growth slowing, inflation rising, and that terrible stagflation word that's such a problem. I mean, we are potentially looking at a moment at midnight tonight, 12:01 p.m. tonight, where the end of cheap consumer goods is here. That is over. 40 years of the American middle class being able to afford the TV, the smartphone, the clothes, the soccer equipment, all the stuff that over the years has been made more cheaply overseas. All those things are going to be taxed dramatically tonight. And for some time, maybe producers and importers can eat some of that cost, but it is pretty certain that Americans are going to pay much, much higher costs for the things they've been used to for a generation.
Is it commonsensical or is it overly simplistic to say, because you mentioned TVs, you want to buy a new TV, if they've already got it in stock, you're probably in decent shape, but if the new stock is coming in, you could be in trouble.
If you want to upgrade your phone, if you need a new car. I mean, this is what we've been seeing people do for the past couple of weeks, trying to make these purchases that they can afford and they need to now because they're worried about what's going to come ahead. But you look at the Nintendo Switch. I just saw a line of people a few days ago outside to get in for the pre-orders outside the Nintendo store. Now they're pausing the release of that because they don't know how to price it, because it could potentially, a $450 device cost $900. And is that even feasible? Will they even sell it here? This is what we don't know. These are the kinds of decisions companies are making.
Yeah, and parents being pushed by their kids. I want it. I don't care how much it costs, right? Ashley, you heard John Kennedy say Trump owns this now. Is there any indication he's comfortable with this big gamble, or any indication he's having even the slightest bit of hesitation? But if he is comfortable with it, is he pinning his presidency on these tariffs?
Well, right now, both publicly and privately, there's no indication he is anything but comfortable with this big gamble, as you put it. It is just about anyone would agree. And that's also been fascinating for me to watch because, again, having covered him since 2015, he talked about this in his first term last time, but he really used to view the stock market in the same way he viewed polls. And when the stock market would go down, he would get worried and he would try to make adjustments. And he is now in a way that is very un-Trumpian. Trump is someone who generally is trying to win the minute, the hour, the day, the person who is directly in front of him. But right now, he has made public comments that show he has, at least for now, a bit more of a stomach for, as he's urged the American public, a bit more pain or taking your medicine in order to get better. And it's an interesting question of how long this will last, because politically, you're right. One of the key reasons that Donald Trump beat Joe Biden this cycle was because of the economy, because the economy, while some indicators were good, the vibes were bad. And right now, not only are the actual indicators, for instance, of the stock market not good, but the vibes, again, are quite bad.
And joining us now is an attorney who is directly involved in this Alien Enemies Act case, Lee Gelernt, Deputy Director of the ACLU's Immigrants' Rights Project. Lee, I understand the ACLU just filed a lawsuit in the Southern District of New York to protect future deportees to El Salvador. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so we have filed a habeas action in the Southern District of New York. We intend to file more habeas actions, obviously one in Texas, where most of the men are detained. And I just want to be clear about what the Supreme Court did. The Supreme Court absolutely did not bless the use of this wartime authority during peacetime. It simply didn't reach those questions. All it said was you need to use what's called habeas corpus to file your actions. But the critical takeaway from the court is that it actually, on the substance, rejected the government's position. The government was arguing in court that it did not need to provide any due process notice to the individuals, so that they could just whisk them away like they did with hundreds of other men. The Supreme Court said emphatically, you must provide them with notice, and not just notice, but meaningful notice so they can actually go into court and challenge their removal. So that's the real takeaway, notwithstanding some of the quick headlines, is that the Trump administration didn't really win anything. It just simply said, it won the technical point that you should file in habeas corpus in different places, but not the substance. They wanted the ability to summarily remove people without giving them any notice. And the court could not have been clear. That is not permissible. You must give people notice. So the case is just going to start over again now with the fact that the government can just whisk people away.
So you're saying they really didn't win here, although they're taking victory laps at this point. When you talk about due process, Lee, I think, in practical purposes, is it going to work? I mean, aren't there barriers if they have to have individual filings and individual cases? I mean, how are all of these individuals who they are saying should be deported with the Alien Enemies Act going to find counsel in time?
So we're going to file class actions. The fact that it's in habeas doesn't mean we have to do it one by one. Even if we did, we would have test cases. But we're going to file class actions. We've already filed one. We're going to file another one in Texas. So we don't think it would have to proceed individually. Sooner or later, the Supreme Court's going to have to rule on whether they can use this wartime authority. We think it's clear they can't use this wartime authority against a criminal organization during peacetime. But that case, that issue will probably get back up to the Supreme Court. I think the Trump administration is not really accurate in claiming victory. I think when you look at the substance, they lost. They wanted the ability not to give any notice and people just whisk people away. As I said, when you look at the opinion, it could not have been clear. They were rejecting the Trump administration's position on the substance and just saying, file in a different court. But there is no victory here for the Trump administration. If anything, it's an enormous victory for us. The court could have said, you don't need to give these people notice, could have agreed with the Trump administration. Yeah, you don't need to give them notice, just remove them. The court could not have been clearer, all 9 justices.
But some people have already been removed without that due process, right? And we don't know the specific evidence that the Trump administration claims to have that everybody they removed are gang members. We've certainly heard a number of stories from family members and lawyers of cases where people had been deported, they believe, just because of a tattoo that might have been a misidentification, might not have had anything to do with a gang, whether it was a symbol like a crown, for example, that might represent something completely different in an individual's life. So what does this Supreme Court decision mean for those folks who are already in El Salvador?
Yeah, well, so first of all, you're absolutely right. We think many, if not most, were misidentified as gang members, and they unfortunately were put on planes. But as Julia said, that's a separate issue. I think Judge Boasberg will have to take that up, whether they violated his order by sending the people there, notwithstanding his temporary restraining order. The fact that the Supreme Court said do it in a different court doesn't excuse them if they violated his order. So that, I think, will continue to proceed. The government's saying, no, Judge Boasberg can't look at that anymore. He absolutely can. And so, but that'll be on a different track from us trying to stop them using the Alien Enemies Act going forward.